candidly, I was disheartened by some of the responses from our residents because of their just feeling not heard and feeling left out of some of the proposals. And I'd like to just reference the summary of the Town and Oro Valley Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So this was the phase one document that was presented to the council. There was some discussion on it, but on page 58, so this is towards the end of the document, and it's a summary statement. It says the development of the program service and facility amenity priority rankings. So these are the rankings that was high, medium, and low, is the culmination of all data created in the needs assessment. So that data was coming from the residents. That's public input, that's resident input in the needs assessment phase of the master plan, including that statistically valid survey. So it was really a mix. I mean, I'm really proud of the outreach that was done and of the community input that was provided. Where I was a bit disheartened is that that's not reflected then and the next step. And I think what's positive about this is that with that community input, that we're going to pivot and it's going to be included. I'm confident of that. So it goes on to say that the rankings are critical foundational information to the development of phase two of the master plan. And I agree. The rankings are critical foundational information to the development of phase two of the master plan. And as some of the public has stated tonight, and I think Vice Mayor Barrett, so I apologize, but I think it's worth repeating, is that the top three facility amenity priorities identified by residents were natural surface trails, number one, multi-use paved trails, number two, open space conservation areas trails, number three. And then number six out of the 8 was, in terms of high priority, was large community parks. So the equity mapping that was conducted by Pros Consulting, in my opinion, clearly showed, as I listened to the presentation, showed the need for a community park north of Tangerine. And in that earlier document, it defines a community park as a park that's 10 to 75 acres. And so I believe the phase two of the master plan should reflect that need, and we should seek opportunities because clearly there's a need for a community park north of Tangerine. Because of the high priority ranking of natural surface trails and the multi-use paved trails and the open space conservation areas and trails, we need to give greater emphasis to that. It simply cannot be ignored. And I believe that is changing, and that we're going to give the greater emphasis to those 3 priority items that they deserve. And I think similar to the conceptual plans for the town's parks and community center that reflect current and proposed uses based on community input, and there'll be changes as we get, as this is discussed on the website and there's additional neighborhood meetings, we'll see changes to those plans. The town's existing natural surface trails, multi-use paved trails, and open space conservation should be mapped, and proposed recommendations to improve the trail system should be proposed so that we give it as equal value because that's what our residents said was important to them. I'd like to suggest or recommend to our staff and to the consultant to give some effort to defining trail service standards for these different trails that were identified. Some possibilities could include some ratio of miles of trail per population or proximity to the town's trail system from households. So for example, we're positioned very nicely. I'm talking personally because of where we live. I'm just a few minutes from a multi-use path. And that path takes me just a few minutes further to a natural service trail. Now, I'm not near a micro park or a neighborhood park, but that trail system is something that's very important to me. And I believe it's important to my neighbors. In fact, I see Councilmember Bowen out there jogging most evenings. I'd like to see him put a reflector or lights on, but anyway, uh, it's such a wonderful, my point is, it's such a wonderful asset to our community. And the public has said that. I mean, they've said it in the and other before we even started out on this. Our trails were identified as being something that were important. So that trail service standard could be based on access to these trails. You know, are they 5 minutes away from homes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? How accessible are they? And so, you know, I understand that that might be impractical, but then perhaps focusing on connectivity of the trail system to parks and open space, schools, retail centers, to county, state, and federal lands. I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about our town is that we are surrounded by public lands, state park, federal lands, county lands, state trust lands. And these provide wonderful recreational opportunities, but it's the trails within our community that connects us, that can connect us to those assets, those resources. You know, I recommend that management priorities and actions to improve and maintain the town's natural surface and multi-use paved trails be included in phase 2, and that the plan should also identify funding priorities for these trail systems, similar as they are for the parks. So that would be some of the you know, direction that I would provide to staff, and have spoken to staff about this. And I feel confident that because of the input of our residents and the discussion tonight, that we'll see re-emphasis given to these priorities that residents identified.